Hi everyone, George here, and I would like to bring to you a short video with respect to Canadian inflation. I would like to discuss some of the root causes and potential solutions. Now, without any further ado, I don't believe we can have a complete discussion before discussing who is the current governor of the Bank of Canada. So, the current governor of the Bank of Canada is TIFF MACKLEM. Uh, his full name is Richard Tiffany MACKLEM, or as we like to call him in Greek, Timalakas for short, because we like us Greek folks like to Hellenicize everybody. So uh, to make a long name short and to be able to pronounce it properly, Timalakas is a uh, short and sweet name for this fellow. He went to the Selwyn House School and avoided Egypt to go directly to Queen's University and later to Western Ontario, get his degree there. He joined the Bank of Canada in 1984, and he was passed up for advancement uh, after Carney's departure, in essence because the fellow did not have any private sector experience. And let me tell you, going directly um, to university and not having to endure the pain of going to Egypt. Not that Egypt was painful, but it's still a requirement for most Quebec residents. But if you do have funds, money, and being a person of privilege, I guess you can bypass the rules and skip a couple of steps, save yourself a year or two, and go directly into university. And under his tenure, inflation has grown. So I don't think that Mr. Trudeau, being a person of privilege himself, could have hoped for a better candidate, a white male that comes from an affluent background and hightailed it to the top and skipping with a main, previously prerequisite, that being private sector experience. Now, this video is not to berate or defame Mr. MACKLEM. It is to discuss some of the root causes of inflation as it stands now in Canada, and perhaps propose some solutions greater than what has been proposed so far. So, with that said, we can move on to our uh, next slide, and here we have um, a picture of Mr. Polyev, who for 2 years now, and initially I completely discounted his thoughts, but it appears that there may be some truth to his story. That being the enormous amount of spending and the unprecedented expansionary monetary policy uh, were the crux of Mr. Polyev's argument, that being um, that this extraordinary spending and unprecedented expansionary monetary policy was the key catalyst to today's inflation. Of course, Mr. Macklin denied this, and my sources was a story published on the 28th of July, 2021 from Global News. The Bank of Canada Governor TIFF MACKLEM, writing in a column for the Financial Post newspaper on Thursday, said Canadians can be confident that the cost of living will not rise out of control as the economy reopens from the COVID-19 pandemic. Lo and behold, we stand in a situation where um, where the reality is contrary to what uh, Mr. Macklem forecasted. Now, Mr. Polyev, it's interesting to note, he suggested that Mr. Macklem be fired, and if he was prime minister, he would fire him. Now, that presents a bit of an issue, because if you do that, it shows strongly that uh, the Bank of Canada is not completely independent of the government, and that can throw the financial markets into disarray um, for one reason or another. And we've seen that happen in Great Britain, and I believe in Turkey as well. There was a lot of financial turmoil in the markets when Mr. Erdogan uh, refused to have interest rates rise in response to the Turkish inflation, which is in double digits and more or less 80%. And it's remarkable how Turkey can sustain itself with that type of inflation for such a long period of time. Um, so it does appear that uh, the expansionary monetary policy and the spending by the liberal government, especially before and after the COVID crisis, has led to some aspects of inflation. Now, the latest stats from the job market is that Canada's job market is pretty strong. There's a lot of jobs being created. So we have a strong economy, yet we have a malaise, that being inflation in Canada. Let's go to our next slide. So the other cause that has been noted, especially by the Liberal government, is labor shortages and supply chain problems. So due to the pandemic, more than 200,000 people have left food, educational, healthcare, and social services. And do you blame them? I think that we've taken for granted for too long, and we've shortchanged people in the food service industry, farmers, educators, healthcare workers, and social service workers are overworked. There was a crescendo of this crisis throughout the pandemic. Then the advent of the gig economy uh, came about, and people said, "Well, if I'm going to lose my job in the food industry, for example, why don't I just become a, uh, a Uber driver or something else?" And more people take on gigs, and currently the technology that's available out in the market with apps like Etsy and other apps of a similar nature, and even the ability to resell items on eBay, they the technology and market has changed technologically to allow people to be more self-reliant, more self-dependent, more entrepreneurial, and not need a boss to tell them how to do the job. Um, Coupled with the baby boomer retirements, now we have come to the realization of Freedom 55 did work for most people. So there is a whole generation of Canadians that are leaving the job market. So we have a combination of of labor shortages and supply chain problems. To be quite frank with you, I haven't uh, found enough research to get a grasp of how supply chain problems have been we have how we incurred that, and where's the solution to this. um, I guess the old axiom is don't put your eggs uh, in one basket should have held true throughout time, but for not only for investing but also for how to conduct business. Now, if you have all your manufacturing in, let's say, China, and China locks down uh, their production workers due to a zero COVID policy, then we're stuck, right? Who's going to manufacture the goods if China's locked down? If you have uh, jobs being offloaded, offshored abroad, again, that puts us in a bit of a vulnerable position because at that point, how do you replace your workers? It's not like you're drawing from a resource pool that's close to home. Uh, you're going overseas, and that could be a problem. But at the same token, it seems two major trends in industry are manufacturing going to China, and and then the thought industry, engineering and whatnot, and software going to India. And it's not one corporation that's doing that. There's several. and they're putting their eggs in one basket. Perhaps a more diversification of your labor resources would do us well. Again, I can't dwell on this too long, and to be quite frank with you, I need to do more research and to become more authoritative on that topic. All right, let's move on to another. So this is one, probably this is the second cause of our inflation crisis. Let's go on to slide number 5. Now, remarkable enough, there are countries that have escaped inflation. Although the liberal government is pointing abroad and saying, look, it's global, there have been countries that have escaped the inflation crisis. Most notably, Japan, China, Greece, much to my surprise, is number 2. Now, you can explain Greece by the fact that um, due to the 2008 financial crisis, Greece has become more fiscally responsible than ever before, and they probably learned their lesson. They don't want to fall into the same uh, pitfall as they did before. We have Grenada, Switzerland. Of course, Switzerland has always been uh, the center of financial wisdom, and it remains as such. Thailand, Brunei, North Macedonia, Senegal, and the Comoros Islands. Oh, well. So, unfortunately, if we were to give the current government a report card as to how they managed inflation, and it appears that there is more than one cause, and it's not necessarily um, something that is of global nature, that it's a problem caused from external factors. There is also domestic factors that contributed uh, to the inflation crisis, and um, I believe that the federal government should take uh, a more serious tone in solving it, and perhaps less partisan. Now, solutions. I consulted the CPAcanada.ca site. There's this fellow by the name of David Alexandre Brassard. As individuals, so what we're proposing here is two types of solutions. One being individual behaviors, and one possibly uh, government action that can be taken. So, as individuals, we can reduce consumption, become more frugal, uh, stay away from the consumer culture as much as we can, because with tough times, we should be uh, tightening our belts, cook more at home, and enjoy uh, and, and reduce the consumption of processed food. This is all according to Mr. Brassard. Postpone renovation plans, extend the life of durable goods, take advantage of the resale market, comparison shop. I know that there are certain games out there that are being resold for 100 times the markup. Ordinarily, it would go $80 retail, and now because they're out of print, they can go as high as 900. I'm certainly not going to fall victim to that type of sham, to for lack of a better word, and drive less and basically walk and get more exercise instead of spending money on gas. Lately, I heard a story that even for charging electric vehicles, that cost is going to increase dramatically. So, you know, since most of us work from home now, drive less and walk more, get some exercise. All right, so changing our behaviors. And lastly, what can the government do? Now, so far, we have a textbook example from a fellow that has not had any private sector experience. Let's face it, let's tell the truth as it is. He left the Bank of Canada when he was passed up as a candidate to replace Mr. Carney. He went to academia, um, where again you become more proficient as to what the textbook says. But I guess when you fall into that trap, the trap being that you don't have any creative solutions and you have to follow what was in the textbook. You cannot uh, become more creative and try to try something that hasn't been tried before, as opposed to trying a tactic that previously has almost always ended in recession. Um, and it appears that the government seems to be um, hopeless in the sense that they're always riding the train on the same track uh, with respect to how they're trying to solve this issue. For example, the mini budget for Ms. Christiane Freeland came out recently, and again, um, we're looking at targeted spending on the individuals that need it the most, which we're talking about low-income Canadians. But every time um, the government gives individuals funds, you have to understand that the people that are offering these individuals goods and services are cognizant of this handout and will adjust the prices accordingly in due time to get their share of the pie. So, in fact, it appears that you're doing these individuals a favor, that you are giving them an advantage, but that advantage is going to be counteracted by the market. So, in fact, they might be less advantageous than before. Certainly, being frugal and teaching people how to fish instead of giving them a fish, it would be in order now. And what I'm saying with respect to that is um, really, if you want to come up with a solution to help people that are not earning a high enough income to make ends meet, is study the factors that put individuals into low paying jobs and give them appropriate training and resources to advance themselves rather than giving them a handout. So, the other thing that I haven't seen and I'd like to see, apart from everybody throwing their partisan issues aside and coming together as a government saying, look, Canada's in crisis now, we need to act in concert and together for the benefit of all the country, is an emergency tax force. I put tax force because I'm always enthralled with tax, but task force to study supply chain issues and labor shortages, and that task force should come up uh, with proposed solutions that the government can execute almost immediately. So I hope I was clearer than that. What we do need is a task force comprised of different consultants from the accounting industry, the big four, economists from universities, um, and then even climate scientists if need be. So they can come up with a more viable solution than what has been proposed so far. Because as far as the mini budget is concerned, what we're dealing with is a bit of tax and quite a little bit more of handouts, which really have proven to be insufficient. Let's become more fiscally responsible. Let's reduce waste. Let's face it, folks. We don't need a prime minister that spends $6,000 a night on a luxury hotel room, um, uh, in the midst where people are actually losing their home. He could have gone for uh, a more modest room, and I could understand if the total cost amounted to $6,000 per night, if that cost included his security, but it didn't apparently. This was a high-end splurge on one individual, which is reprehensible. Um, so across the board, the government needs to tighten its waist, its belt, reinvest additional GST and HST revenue back to reputable employers, such as university research. Um, if you're investing in research and granting individuals that are talented um, with funds to conduct certain projects that can lead to more innovation, and new technology or new therapies, that'd be great. So that's an idea. Now, the other item is actually to either decrease or cap municipal house evaluations and municipal tax, because let's face it, we have a country where mayors have gone above and beyond their jurisdiction. A mayor should ensure that the streets are safe, that infrastructure is safe, that waste is being collected. Going to all sorts of conventions abroad and having sister countries and investing in other luxurious programs like building stadiums and whatnot, that's above and beyond. And if you have a cap on municipal expenses and a cap on municipal earnings, that means landlords be able to um, will be able to invest more in their tenants and also not being obligated to increase their rents on such a with such a high extent. So let's think out loud here. If you have a municipal evaluation that increases by 10%, that landlord will have a legitimate expense and a legitimate reason to increase rent. And a $500 one-time rebate ain't going to do much. However, if you put a cap on the municipal evaluation and a cap on municipal tax, that reduces the legitimate expense of the landlord, and that gives added ammunition to the tenant to expect uh, a lower increase in rents than anything in any other situation. And with that, the tenant can go to court and to the rental board and say, look, why is my rent being increased by 5% when his municipal tax increase was only 2%, for example? And that's how you I think that would have been a more viable solution. You may disagree. If you do, um, put your comments below. Now, how about Canada First? Now, so that sounds a little bit MAGA, but I'm not proposing anything MAGA here or make Canada great again. What I'm proposing is that, as I mentioned before, there seems to be an orgy of offshoring labor, while corporations that are offshoring labor are increasing their prices here in Canada. So what that means is they're not reinvesting their funds in Canada, they're sending that investment abroad to enrich other countries. And what's worse is that we are putting all our eggs in one basket. Manufacturing going all to China, the thought industry going to India and elsewhere, but not back into Canada. So perhaps if not doing it at completely um, completely outlawing outsourcing to foreign countries, perhaps enforce a certain percentage that needs to be a certain percentage of labor costs that needs to be domestic in Canada as opposed to abroad. Otherwise, tax, impose a tax. That's more or less it. So that's my 2 cents. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope I wasn't too choppy in my speech as well. If you have any comments, by all means, comment below. And I hope that you keep the comments constructive and enlightening. So with that said, I will conclude. Thank you all for subscribing. So this video is now under the playlist called Politics and Economics, because those are two topics that I like to discuss and research as well, in addition to tax. And with that said, I bid you all farewell for now. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for telling people about this channel. And until we meet again, take care.